Hey everybody, welcome to the next YUI Open Roundtable for Thursday, May 1st. We have with us Eric Ferraiuolo and Caridy Patino. We're going to talk about updates and new features and new things about the Modown project. Caridy, I want to ask you, so I guess tomorrow's May 2nd, are you going to celebrate Cinco de Mayo?
That's on May 5th.
Oh, May 5th, sorry, not 6th.
Yeah.
Soon. As opposed to Dos de Mayo. So what we've got going on right now on the YUI side of things is we're just in the latest sprint 14. We've got a lot of updates for Loader, and we've got some new things coming on from Tilo. We're looking at potentially adding Hammer.js as in-place substitution for some of the event stuff, the touch events. It's not backwards compatible, so for a while there'll be both modes, Hammer.js and the old mode, until we get the deprecation process going. Outside of that, I think we're ready to go ahead and start talking. Caridy, if you're ready to go.
So I think Caridy has bathrooms being built in his apartment right now, in his condo. So I can start off with the intro. Of Modown and until the people building the bathrooms are done for the day. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. So with Modown, what it really is a collection of components and packages to really help people build. And we mainly focus on the server side of things, but to really help people build out the server side of their web projects and their front ends, and it's like the server side of the front end. And so it's really focused on Node.js being the low-level platform, and then building some components on top of Node.js that really go to address a lot of the common and hard problems, especially the ones that we're seeing teams run into at Yahoo, and trying to solve those in a way and provide these common building blocks that people can use to just make it easier to develop their application and really focus on the features they're trying to build, and not re-implementing a lot of these common things that every web application ends up needing to do. So one of the major focuses we did was build a lot of these components in a very modular way. They're all open source. They're all on npm on GitHub. But we looked at what like application frameworks a lot of teams are using, and the teams inside of Yahoo, and Express.js was definitely by far the most popular. So a lot of the things we did were to try to cater around making that better for people, and providing building blocks that extend what Express does. So we don't actually have a website or a product or whatever. Modown's like the code name, but if you go on npm and you search for Modown as a keyword, you will find a lot of the libraries. I think I'm trying to do it right now. Keyword : Modown? No. Let's see, is that it?
I think if you just search for Modown in itself, it'll show a lot.
Yeah, I was trying to get it where it was the keyword. Here we go. Yeah, so the types of things we have, if you look in there, there's a lot that are around Express, and so one of the core Modown components that we have that I can definitely talk to is one called Express State. And the idea behind Express State is to be able to share the server side state data that's either configuration or data that the server may have gotten from some back-end API, and that it used to render the initial page, and be able to use this data and pass it along to the client side of an application. So a lot of everybody's really moving towards this idea of having rich client-side JavaScript applications using HTML5 push state and routing on the client and all this. But to provide the initial page load, a lot of times you may want to render that initial view on the server. And what Express State's job is to help you then pass along the initial state data and configuration data along to the client, so it can take over from where the server left off. And then we have that as like a very low-level piece and building block, and you can use that directly to expose data to the client side that you're using on the server side as well. And then we also have an Express YUI package, which depends on Express State, and it uses that. And what it allows you to do is helps you as a developer who's building a application that's using YUI on the client to really set up and configure YUI, automatically do things like put YUI in debug mode when you're in development, and put it in production mode off the CDN when you're working in production, and be able to add your custom modules and all that configuration, and just make sure that it's all passed to the client, and that you will load YUI on your page efficiently, as asynchronous as possible to not block rendering of the other content on the page, and just really help bootstrap YUI. So they work really well together in that way.
Question about so for Express State, does that mean you're sending the data down twice, or is it that?
Yeah. So the data sent down twice. I should have elaborated on that. So the idea with Express State is to make that data very accessible to JavaScript. So what it wants to do is it puts a JSON blob inside of a script element in the HTML, and that makes it very easy to access that data in a namespace fashion. So you do like window.app or whatever you want the top level object to be, models and or like .photos or something like that, and say that's an array of like data that represents photo models or something that you can use. So it's this idea of serializing the data across the wire. And so that does have duplication, especially if you're rendering that same data in the HTML. But luckily, when you gzip things, it more or less covers that overlap for the most part. It adds about a 25% overhead, even though you're doubling the data in theory.
But you get the benefit of instant rendering, right? Because you pushed it from the server side too.
Yeah, you get that. You also get what the server side used to render the initial page, and what the client side used to be in sync, because the client side isn't making another data request. Like the data is just right there in the page that it can start with. So that's very handy. But this idea of creating these building blocks, and even in Express State, it's built in such a way that there's like modules under the hood, and it's a very thin wrapper to actually integrate with Express. But this idea of creating these building blocks is really like what we've tried to model Mojito around. It's like, okay, there's this common problem. We needed to send this data around, configuration and state data. And then there's another big common problem that we saw, which was like we need to make it much easier to configure YUI, especially when you have your own custom modules, and really integrate that in with your application. And that also needed to pass along this configuration data about YUI's configuration to the client. So this is where we start adding up these building blocks, and we really start getting a pretty long way in helping people work on their applications. And then some other ones we have are like combo handler, to be able to have a middleware to serve multiple files in one HTTP request. It's very common for YUI people to care about. And then we also we have some stuff around routes. So really managing your routes, and also routes is yet another thing where in a lot of applications you may be defining your routes in Express and to be able to render the initial page views on the server, or as the fallback in the case like you're using an old version of IE that doesn't understand this. And then what we can do is make sure that those routes are working the same on the client as well, like if you're using YUI's router, for instance. And so we have a few components around just managing that stuff and creating logical names to routes. So you can say, I want the path to my index page, or path to photo with this ID. And so we realized that like kind of managing this metadata around routes and giving them logical names was another area that was pretty common. So something we also wanted to add some components around. But Caridy, are you able to hop on?
Yeah, I'm good. Again, all right. Over so let me actually share my screen so I can share some stuff.
Yeah. So Caridy prepared things. I was just trying to go off the cuff here.
I think you're doing great.
All right. Let me see. Let me know when you see it.
Yeah, we can see it.
It's there.
All right. So really quick, we talked about some of these things during YUIConf last year. Today, we just want you to give you an update of some of the components, some of the new components that are coming, some of the things that we're working on today, and we'll be working on the next few weeks. But essentially, just a quick history around this. Remember what we mentioned in YUI Conf, you were there or not. But essentially, we have three major competing frameworks within the company. Mojito was one of them, the open source framework that we released around 2 years ago, monolithic, opinionated framework. And then we have two more frameworks that we're trying to attack different areas in the company, specifically use cases for media, for Flickr, and so on. So we decided to go one level under and start providing the building blocks so these different frameworks could work on top of those building blocks. And we ended up having a very compelling set of components, and we plan to continue growing those components and adding more and more, trying to solve these very hard problems that we identify across these three different major frameworks. This helps us a lot because we can identify things that are common between different use cases. So in YUIConf, I think we announced like 6 components at that point. Today, we have a few more components. We have been maturing some of them, so I have the slides here. I don't have fancy slides, but I do have technology stack to try to show you how these things stack together. Because we have seen that people really get sidetracked by the fact that these small things work independently, and then when you have to put them together, you really don't know how to do it. You don't know how they stack together. So hopefully this will help the people to identify with some of these and try to understand how we are thinking about solving this particular problem. Then, as you can see here, I slice this in three different areas. The browser layer, which is anything that could potentially run on the browser. The server layer in the middle, that is just about Node.js and the things that you will run in your Express application in a Node.js front-end server. And then the build layer, which is what you normally do to get your code ready for production. So essentially, we are moving in between these 3 layers. All these Modown components, some of them are targeting the browser, some of them are targeting the browser and the server, some of them the server only, and some of them even expand a little bit to provide functionalities that we need to do the build process for your application. So that's why you see these 3 layers in the middle here. And then on top of that, we want to stack them, saying we have the ECMAScript or the JavaScript runtime that is common through these 3 different layers. And then on top of that, we have the browser engines and all the different browsers, major browsers, while the server layer and the build layer are mostly about Node.js. You might have build scripts that are shell script or something like that. There's no specific Node, but mostly what we're focused on is Node.js as the essential part of the build process that we have with Grunt and Broccoli and Gulp and all these different task services or things that you might use to build your application. As you see, the server side at the moment is the biggest one. We have a lot of components targeting Express, specifically targeting Express extensions, trying to create things that will extend the Express capabilities so you can use them in your application to easily add a new feature to your application. And this is something that I think we mentioned during YUIConf, but Eric wrote, let me try to find it here. Eric wrote a proposal for extending Express application, and we have been using this for all the components that we have created for Express. And it's basically a very simple way to extend an Express application, and a reliable way to do it, branding the extension so you know what are the extensions that are applied. You avoid applying extension twice. Remember, when you grow your application, when you have a complex system like, I don't know, Media or Flickr, Yahoo, they are big, a bunch of people working, and a lot of things moving pieces there that you need to control, so you need to have a proper branding process to avoid trying to extend the application, the Express application twice with the same component, but at the same time, you want to have more control, and you want to really know what's going on there. So this branding strategy, you have a chance, we will share after the video, but But basically, read through it. It's very small. You will learn how we're doing things with Express, and potentially you will be creating some of this Express engine that could potentially just expand the capabilities of Express, or potentially mix in with some of the components that we are creating, which is the ultimate goal here, to be able to give you building blocks that you will go ahead and wrap around with your own things and create your own infrastructure based on that. So look at it. We'll share this let's go back.
One thing I want to bring up is, I mean, you mentioned Express a lot, but you're saying Modown is not exclusively dependent on Express. It's just that it's the most popular, the most widespread middleware, right?
Yeah. That's debatable though, but I think at this point, and that's why you see all these packages being branded with Express prefix. You know, you might be able to use some of it with other engines similar to Express. Maybe they will work with some of the new stuff that are coming that are very similar or maintain the same API that Express. I don't know. We haven't tested that. But there is a possibility there. But in any case, as Eric mentioned, most of these things, what you get when you require one of these things is actually a function that represents the extension based on the branding definition that I just showed you. But really, they also have access, direct access to some of the internal functions and internal components of the package itself that you can use directly. Like, for example, Express State, it has the serialization engine, which is basically a function that you can pass in an array, and it will give you a JavaScript blob that represents, an object, and it just serializes that. But it maintains functions, serialized regular expression, it serializes many other different things, and it does it in such a way that it is secure. It will not introduce script tags, or it will pretty much clean that up. And those are things that you potentially want to use as a standalone function, just to include that thing in your application and use it directly. So it really, we're trying to maintain that kind of pattern across all these things. Go ahead.
Yeah, so like in that example of Express State, it's written in such a way that there's already one main index.js module, which is the Express module that's just, and then there's two helper modules, an exposed class and then the serialization function. And those two things, if we ever, if there's ever a need to like pull them out, we could easily publish those as their own package. And right now, the Express wrapper is actually the smallest bit of code in the whole thing. But we wrote it with modular in mind, but we just didn't take the time to like go through the ceremony of creating many packages, because this was the one use case where we had it. And when more uses come up, this would be very simple to pop this thing out into its own package, or the other support module in here. So.
But I look on the site and look for Modown. I see something called Locator. How's that fit into the framework?
Well, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. So yeah, this is the one, Express State, the serialization function, which is just part of the lib. So you can do something like require Express State /lib/serialize, and you will get access to this thing that just serialize structures, maintaining functions and regular expression, and escaping all those things to be able to put it into a blob, JavaScript blob in your HTML when you render on the server side. All right, so back to this. So all these things that are here, by the way, the legend here is pretty much the purple things are things that we're working on. Blue things are things that are out there in open source projects. You will see that across all the slides, but mostly in the last 6 months per se, we have been trying to nail down the API on Express YUI and Express State and all the consequences down here, mostly trying to mature those components which are essential for the 3 different frameworks that we have internal, but also applications that are using that thing directly. For example, the pure website. Pure website is using some of these components and so on. And in the last 3 months, the last quarter, we really focus on the Intel stuff. You see this is at the top here. We have been expanding to the client since all the Intel stuff are affecting the server side and the client side runtime, especially at this point where we have Node.js that doesn't support Intel out of the box.
And Intel is internationalization, in case.
Yeah, good call. So basically what we have been doing in the last 3 months is focus on getting all the pieces that are needed to be able to add translations to your application, be able to have the proper number format, date format, complex translations, plural, and actually we have an open hour like a few weeks ago about this, so I will not go into details, but basically what we're doing is, again, stacking things on top of each other. So for example, for Intel, you need to have the Intel polyfills if you need it, depending on the runtime. Firefox already implemented this, the latest version, Chrome as well, so the polyfill is not needed there. But Internet Explorer 11 also has that, but Safari doesn't, and so on. So you have to bring the polyfill when you need it. We will talk a little bit more about how to do that, but essentially.
For you that you've mentioned kind of in passing, but you talk about aspects of polyfills. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the reasoning why you're doing this as a polyfill versus some other way?
Well, we are not doing the polyfill, although this one is an open source project from someone, Andy. Actually, we have an open hour with Andy that we did a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. This one, the Y Promise implementation is from Juan, so that's from our team. Actually, it should be purple here. Yes, module loader is another polyfill that we have been using for a few months already, investigating and trying to get it sanitized and use it. This one is also open source. The ones that we implement are not polyfills, are libraries, and we want to pretty much make sure that whenever you want to use those libraries, you are using the correct polyfill if needed. So there is really not much here. It's just a matter of normalizing the runtime so you can use the components that we are creating. Basically, what we're saying is, if you want to use the Intel message format, which give you the capabilities to do plural translation, plurals, and even formatting numbers and dates in a different ways, and for custom formatters and so on, you need to have the Intel available as a global variable in your system. And for that, you could use the polyfill if you want, but that's in your hand. We are not in the business of trying to accommodate all the pieces for you. We are not creating a framework. We are creating building blocks, and it's your responsibility to put them in such a way that they work together. And that's why I try to put it in a stack here, so you can see how they stack and what are the things that you need in order to use other things. Like, for example, here, in order to use, actually this one is backward, because in order to use, no, this one is good. So in order to use map, you need to have annotations, which is dependency on map and so on. So I'm not so sure if that answers your question, but mm-hmm. That's all I can say about polyfills.
Well, but the other thing with the polyfills is that the reason they're there is because these are features that either have been spec'd and they're not available in the runtimes, and while some of them are. So like, excuse me, Intel and Promise now are shipping in some like in, let's see, Firefox, I believe, but definitely in Chrome. Chrome has Promise now. And so these are shipping in the browser, so they're in those ECMAScript runtimes at the very bottom. So the idea is that if we look towards leveraging these future features and using polyfills to do it, that layer of code there just eventually goes away, which is nice. Nobody has to maintain it. Nobody has to load the code in the actual runtime, so you don't have that overhead. It'll just be there, built in. And so that focus has been a shift for us where we want to embrace that, just because of this ECMAScript as a language evolving so rapidly, and then also the browser runtimes and the browser runtime specifically changing now automatically because browsers are in this mode of auto-updating. And so we know that those features will be coming if they're not already in the browsers. and especially on mobile devices where the browser uptick is much more rapid than what we saw in the past with desktop browsers and old IE sticking around forever. So it's more viable now to know that the polyfills will actually be coming in the short term and not just like some future thing that's like way out there that the polyfill will finally not be needed. It's actually a much shorter time period now. So
this methodology is an advancement over, say, like YUI, where you were sort of stuck with one implementation, and even if the browsers improved like how arrays work, you would be able to take advantage of it.
Yeah, so this way, instead of relying on a proprietary API, like the arrays is a good one, I always use it, like y.array.each in YUI. Now you have this hard dependency on YUI, at least the core part of the library always, when really that code may only be using that method to iterate over arrays using array.forEach built in. And so what we'd rather do is those things that are going to be provided by the platform or are already provided in a majority of the browsers, we want to leverage those and not create these proprietary APIs, which then you're maintained with and you're sort of locked in with no matter how long of time you wait.
Yeah. There is a component here that I didn't talk about yet, which is Express Prep Client. And you see it has an star here, the same for React Intel. Those are things that we are working on, still not open source. They are in the making. But basically, this Express Prep Client will be released soon, and what it allows you is to extend in Express so you can define what are the capabilities that you need in your runtime, in the client runtime, by saying, okay, my client should support Intel because I need it. And it will make sure that Intel is there for you and patch the browser when needed, so you can rely on reliable. You have a runtime that is already complete at the moment that your application code start running. We'll have more information about this, but basically what it allows you is to define rules that prepare the client for executing your application code. And it's the same. You need promise, you might check, okay, promise is there. If it is not there, then go ahead and load this thing that will patch the browser. So promise is going to be available there in a form of a polyfill. This is a very low level package as well, so you have to define your own rules for your application, but eventually we might want to provide a package that's stacked on top of this one with a predefined set of rules that you can enable or disable at some point for your application, depending on the requirements that you have in your application. Again, we want to have the very low level, and then we can stack things on top of it to have a more medium level API, although we don't want to get to the point where this becomes a framework. It's just a library that is stacked on top of another library to give you some sugar on top of it. And we want to do that, for example, for the set of polyfills that we use within Yahoo, those that are already sanitized, those that are already tested, that we are confident that they are good enough, and potentially providing them directly from Yahoo CDN and so on. We'll get to that eventually, but this is something that we have in the making. Actually, I put it here as one of the components that is still private, so you see it's still private. It's almost ready, but we need to continue working on it so we can get it ready. I think there are some examples here, like in here, trying to prepare the client to simply have the loader, the ES6 loader, so we can go ahead and use the new loader, and then for that you need to specify where to go and load these things when needed. So that's this sort of things that we're trying to look at the moment. So going back to the top of the graph here, we have obviously the Intel message format, which is the low-level library, and then on top of that, the things that we already discussed in open hours, like we have the implementation for Dust, we have the implementation for Handlebars, because those two we use it within Yahoo, and React Intel is on the making because we probably will use it within Yahoo as well. But we want people to go ahead and create similar packages that will be in the same layer here that might implement the Intel features for different engines and so on. So ideally, we will start seeing more and more of these things. But you can go ahead and just use Intel message directly. It's already in NPM. I think is not yet in Bower, but it will be in Bower soon.
And then well, I was just going to say, just around the internationalization stuff, we're also working on an effort, because as Caridy described, it's somewhat complex. Like, you have to conditionally load the polyfill, you have to know about then the built-in APIs that are provided under the Intel namespace. Then also this message format thing, which we're adding as a library that's based on some of the proposals that will eventually, hopefully, make it into ECMAScript properly. But for now, we took put a stake in the ground and thought this is the way that we want to do it. And then from there, like, dealing with the integrations with template engines to make it fit with the template engines, the way you write templates and the way you use helpers in these template engines. And so what we're working on is also creating a documentation around this internationalization system as a whole, because it's somewhat more complex with the loading situation and the polyfill and the different layers, that will provide something cohesive and some examples to really describe how this subsystem works within the overall piece here. And that way you could just use that part. Like, even if you're not using Express or any of the other stuff on here, that Intel stuff is a usable chunk on its own as a complete internationalization system that's future compatible and leverages built-in implementations of the internationalization APIs that are in ECMAScript.
Yeah, that was a question I had for you, is how someone who's just coming at this, where do they start? Like, it seems like you have to have a lot of insight into what the component does before you actually use it.
Well, there would be multiple entry points, so that's why I think, like, the Intel stuff is something similar to, like, how we have Pure. Like, this is something we can promote on its own because it's useful to a large number of people. Like, it doesn't really assume much besides, hey, are you using JavaScript? And then if you are, like, okay, you can use Intel and Intel message format. And then it's like, are you using a template engine, and especially one of these that we've already written helpers for? Then now you're really off to the races at that point, with really being able to do internationalizing and localizing your app in a very easy way. That like I was saying, is very future compatible and doesn't require much code to do. Like, these are pretty small libraries, even with all their metadata, compared to other solutions out there.
Yep.
And it's a server and client system as well. So, like, there's aspects of this where you may have a Node.js app. It doesn't even matter if you're using Express or not. You still may want to use these packages on the server, because Node.js doesn't actually support the built-in Intel APIs by default. You actually have to compile and build your own version of Node.js with a particular flag turned on to be able to get this. So this is something we're working with TJ Fontaine, the Node.js maintainer, and some other people at Yahoo who really deal with the infrastructure level of Node.js, are working to try to get this to be hopefully the default, so that Node.js maintains a true proper ECMAScript runtime. The Intel features were added as an addition to ECMAScript 5 under 5.1, and we really want to make sure that Node.js maintains being an actual ECMAScript runtime.
Right, the same strategy about when we're using the browsers and they have Intel compiled and already installed, it'll not have to download the extra components. But same way on the Node.js side, we will have a smaller code base because we won't have to load all that stuff.
Yeah, and while that doesn't really matter as much on the Node side because it's just coming off of the local file system, it's still something where the polyfill hasn't actually, it's more focused on the browser and hasn't actually implemented a particular feature, collation. And that's where we're really hoping that the Intel system we provided had the built-in full Intel features at the Node.js level, so that you could communicate. If you had to do, like, sorting of things, this is where you need the collation feature. If you needed to do that, that's something that you could then, like, communicate with the server, have it do the sorting work, and then send you back the results. And that's really something where in those old browsers you could fall back to an XHR style communication for those sorts of features. But you need the server side to actually have those features, and that's something that is currently lacking at Node.js level by default.
Yeah, this is the issue that Eric referenced to. That a lot of discussions around it, like this is the kind of things that people are seeing happening when they try to use some of these Intel features on the server side, and you see there's a clear problem here where the ordering is not right, and this is the default Node.js configuration. So this is not right. And so we have been engaging with many people in the community to try to push for this to be fixed and to be permanent and to be feature compatible with the browsers at this point, the browsers that already implement the internationalization stuff. So we can share this link as well for people who are interested. This is a very large and very complex thread, but if you want to get into it, you're welcome.
If you know things about ICU and Unicode and internationalization and Node.js and JavaScript, then you should definitely jump in because it's a lot of domain expertise required.
Yeah, we need all the help that we can get. But on top of that, we have been focused on the browser layer and server layer so far. We haven't talked much about the build layer. So I will give you an example of what's going on here. So I will pick up one of the upcoming components, React Intel. I have it open somewhere here so I can share with you some of these examples. Hopefully this will help to clarify. So when you look at translations, before that, I think I have one open. Let me try to find it. Too many tabs open already. All right. Okay. So here is an example where you want to put translation or add translation to your application. You will go ahead and create potentially JSON file, for example. And this is a very common case where you have a JSON file that has different translations. This is what translators will do potentially, or your developers will end up doing manually. But in any case, this is an English translation. You have something like this where you have token replacement. So this is easy. This one is plural, so it will tell you one company or multiple companies and so on. This is really simple. And this is the basic for the translation. Then you go into more complex language, and then you ended up having something that is way more complex, where you have, in French, you need to have the gender to be considered. If there is one travel or more travels, and if there are female or male. So you get into all these things that are way more complex than what you're normally are used to. And this is all string. You see, this is a string that needs to be parsed and then need to be processed.
And this is a standardized syntax.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So this is something that if you're working with professional translators, they understand how to write these messages in this format. And this format works in Java and PHP and in the library that we created in JavaScript as well. So.
Yeah. And then you see, you have all these strings, and you want to use these strings on the server side. You wanted to use it on the client side. You need to have a way to load them. But then at the same time, you see, well, this thing has to be parsed. Are we going to parse this for every user, for every execution? So things get a little bit more complex, and you want to have optimization around it. You want to have a parser that goes and parse this thing and produce a bundle that you can use. If you use YUI, you might want to get a YUI bundle that you can load using the loader. So when you need it, you go and load the thing, the module that you need, and the associated bundle for that module. So you have all this process that help you to get those things ready. And this is where we actually traverse this two browser and server layer, and we get into the build layer, where we also want to have a way for you to be able to go ahead, process that JSON file, producing a potential module that could be used in YUI or maybe AMD, maybe you use CommonJS, depends on what you need. So we ended up in a situation where we need to find ways to be able to process this raw data coming from translations into something that potentially also have to be transpiled into a module system. So all these steps are complicated steps that you need to have in your application if you are really serious about translations and performance.
And so the reason for doing this is to essentially say in your application code, I depend on the settings messages for the settings screen, and it's a module that has all of these strings in it, or potentially even pre-parsed but just so you can have this common dependency system that you'd be used to, where you would say that you depend on the strings and you just treat them as just a yet another module. They just happen to be providing a whole bunch of named strings.
Yeah, and as you see here, I have this area here like blur. So I will get into the next slide, which has this thing really highlighted. I put it in blur because this is an area that was the first area that we work on for the Modown pieces. Now we are going to focus on refactoring this. It's an ongoing effort to try to change that. So I will not focus much on what it is today and how it works today, but potentially what we want to have tomorrow. This is all today is all our proprietary thing. It has our own APIs and our way to create plugins, extensions, get ready pieces that you need for the build process of your application. So we want to walk away from that into using more Grunt, Broccoli, potentially Gulp, and other task executors, and potentially Broccoli that will give us a little bit more extra control over the flow, because as I mentioned, we do have, in most cases, different steps that we need to execute. We need to get the JSON. We need to parse each of these strings, generating some sort of object, in this case arrays that have the tokens and inheritance between the different elements of that, translation and all that, if it is singular, if it is plural, and then all the ramification of that. So it's a complex structure, so we need to generate something that is a JavaScript object that we can easily use from JavaScript without having to do any parsing of any kind at the runtime. So we improve performance by not having to go and parse the whole thing for every user and every request that we need to use that string. So for that, we want to have a process that allows to transpile that from JSON to these objects that are compatible with our internal system, but also being able to transpile that into a module system that will allow you to a specific module format that allow you to use it with a module system. And the same.
I was just going to say, like, I think that the way to think about this too is, if you're familiar with handlebars, is that each of these messages is like a template, and what Caridy's talking about is we can get more efficient. So like in handlebars, you can render a string template every time and it will redo it, or you can parse it once and cache it and then render it every time, but every client or every user is having to run the code to parse it. Or you can get to the point where you're doing the pre-compiled templates, where you're doing all the parsing and you're just getting it to a built-in JavaScript object or a native JavaScript object, in this case a function. In the template case, in the Intel case, it's an array, and then you're just executing through that on the client, and you can save the need for even shipping the parser down to the browser in the handlebars case. So the Intel message format library works very similar to that concept.
Yeah, and now I was about to get into templates. So it's exactly the same thing as you said. It's the same thing. We have the handlebars. We need to transpile that into a function. So we use a compiler. We get a function. Then that function, we need to load it somehow from the different runtimes. We need it at the server. We need it at the client. How you do that? Well, you might need to transpile that into module format that you can use with one of the module systems. Specifically, you use YUI, you can use the loader. You use AMD, you can use the require. And required, yes. You have multiple options at this point. You can use all these different module formats and all these different module systems. We are also working very hard on the new loader, and we'll get to that really quick. We are running out of time, but essentially what going back to this is that we want to stack all these things that are needed for the server and client, but also we want to take care of providing the pieces that are potentially optional to use them to optimize the build process for your application so you can gain extra in performance. So we are keeping all these things in our minds, and we're trying to solve each of these different problems. So jumping into this one, this is the Intel technology stack. So it's more depth into how we see this for people to use. Like in this case, again, we have the runtimes here, which include the browser, the Node.js, any browser that implement already internationalization, which is EMA 4.2, or you potentially use Node.js with the flag, which is Node.js 0.12 will have the flag there. If not, you can just fill it up with a polyfill. So you normalize that. So your application and the libraries that you use can be sure that Intel is there. Whether it is a polyfill or is already implemented by the runtime, we really don't care. We just need to have that thing there, and it's your responsibility to go and do it. And then on top of that, you stack the different React components that we provide. So you stack the Intel message, you stack whatever you need from this. Probably you don't need 3 of them, you need 1 of them. So you pick up one. Maybe if you're up for the task, go ahead and create an Ember Intel that works well with the Ember structures and for Ember applications. And if you use YUI, then probably you will be using the handlebars helper. So that one is
even if you're using Ember, you could probably just get away fine with the handlebars helper.
Yeah. So this is more in details about what Intel is about, but I want to get to the other one before we wrap up, which is the loader. So this has been also the focus for the last 3 months and will remain the focus for a few more months. We have been engaging with different people about the loader in the TC39 meetings as well, trying to push for the loader to be ready in the spec. But basically the same principle. You look at it, it looks a lot like the Intel stuff. You have the different browser engines, you have Node.js, the oncoming version of Node.js that potentially implement the ES modules, browsers that will potentially implement the ES module really soon. Then we have the browsers up to date and the Node.js today, which do not implement these things. So for that, you need to use a polyfill. So you fill that up by using this polyfill that is potentially one of the most popular at the moment. Still in progress, a lot of work to be done there, but it works in some degree today. And then on top of that, what we want to provide is a bunch of extensions to try to get to the feature parity with the things that we have and the things that we have been using for the last 6 or 7 years in YUI. We want to have conditions, we want to have prefetching so we can do parallel loading to get all the stuff that you need ready right away. We want to be able to support aliases so you can create rollups and define specific definitions for how to load your modules. We want to provide combine so we can use a combo handler that we are very used to, and so on. So all these things are coming as part of the new package that will be released, which is the loader extension. So Juan has been working on this for a while. We plan to get it ready soon. It includes most of these extensions and a few more. It actually also includes extensions for being able to use the YUI format with the new loader. I will not get into details about that because this is more complex. The same for AMD and some other extensions that you will see coming up along. But basically what we're saying is we want to provide extensions so you can create a loader instance, plug those extensions, very similar to what happened in Express. It's actually very similar in code as well. We want to do the branding, the same branding that we do in Express. So we want to follow the same principles. They look a lot. They look a lot like the same thing. So we plan to attack this in the same way. And then on top of that, at the application level, what you can do is basically if you have a system.js polyfill, for example, which implement what is going to be the system.import in the browser, you will be able to go ahead and plug some of these extensions and get this system to function just like the YUI loader works today, using combine for combo, using prefetching or using conditions and so on. We also plan to provide potentially a prescribed sort of loader that already has the extension that we want configured in such a way that you can go ahead and load things directly without having to know too much about the internal configuration. We are still looking into this. Again, this is we have a very low-level extension. We might want to put some chewer on top of it so you can use it easily. But maybe this is too far, and we just want to give it to you in a form of low levels, and then you continue from there. But again, you can use this directly with JavaScript. So you want to use the extensions manually when you get the system ready or the loader ready in the browser. You can still use that, use the extensions to provide these extra features that are not coming with the default loader that browsers will implement. So that's the kind of things that we're looking at right now. Also, I don't know if we have more time. Do we have more time?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. So the last piece that I have here is somehow related with the combine that we have been using for years, the combo handler. We know we want to get into the wagon of using HTTP 2.0, or what we know to do today as Speedy. So we also want to make sure that this new loader work well with Speedy, but also for all browsers. When you use the polyfill, you will be able to use the combine for that. And the same will happen for YUI. So what I'm saying here is that some of the work that we are doing in Modown also retrofit back into YUI in some cases that you have seen some updates in the loader in the last 2 or 3 releases. We have been working on the loader to align well with the things that we have been doing to support loading other module formats, to support loading transpile ES6 modules into YUI, that kind of things. The same will happen for the Speedy HTTP2. We want to have the ability to figure out when to use the combine, when not to use it, loading those things from the CDN that supports Speedy. So those are also the things that we are working on, and eventually they will be landing in YUI as well. So it is a retrofit process that we have been implementing for a few months, and we want to continue doing so. Eric, do you want to comment on that, or?
No, I mean, I think you covered it, and that's where like there's a lot of other build-related things too around modules, especially ES6 modules, and so that's also another area we're looking at. And actually, the main transpiler to compile ES6 modules already has YUI as one of the targets, and so we did a lot of work in the YUI side to be able to deal with this, because of the differences between hanging everything off the Y object and doing that namespacing approach that we're all used to versus doing explicit imports and exports like CommonJS, AMD, and the ES6 module system we'll all use. So just getting those things in sync is something that we've been doing in YUI, because the last like an important thing for us is that we want to make sure that if we're trying to push people towards writing this new code as ES6 modules, that it will still work in their current applications, and that's important to us, and something that we made sure to do. And then similarly, if you're using the new loader, but you have all this old code and existing code that's already as YUI modules, you can still load that into your system using the new loader. And those are things that we wanted to make sure were there. And it really helps to like open up YUI to be more open to dealing with code from other places. And then also, as you're authoring code, you're not having to lock yourself into whether or not you're writing a YUI module for a YUI system, or you're writing something for everything else. What we really want is you to be able to write one module that you can use in multiple places by compiling to a YUI module, for instance, and compiling to a CommonJS module, which then can be used on the server. So for things especially like utilities, we a lot of times you run into this problem, and we're hoping this way we can avoid it. And all these same things we talked about with internationalization and having things to help you build things and running on the server and the client are all part of the module system that we're working towards as well, and also being future compatible with what will be sitting in all the browsers and on Node. So yeah.
Yeah. So to answer the other question from Andrew, Alberto wrote like 2 months ago. He wrote this application, so many people from the team were working on this, that showcase how to use Modown. In fact, it does it in such a way that it even uses ES modules, so you really see where we are heading here. So you see authoring the internal pieces of the application in ES6 and then be able to transpile that into YUI modules and be able to use it with the current YUI loader. So that kind of things will help you here. I don't think this is using any Intel internationalization feature, but in general it's using Express YUI, Express State. We haven't updated in a few months, but we probably should go back and update it.
So Pure's website also.
Pure website, yeah. That's
so it's using all the. So we wrote a new getting started thing, which we'll be promoting to production soon, and that is a JavaScript client-side application. And what we did is we wanted to make all that JavaScript code for this getting started feature to actually be written in as ES6 modules, but also used within YUI. So you're writing ES6 modules, but you're leveraging YUI modules, existing YUI modules in YUI core, and then the YUI loader as well to bootstrap and load everything.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what other properties inside Yahoo are using Modown?
So at this point, we have, as I mentioned, the three major frameworks that we have, which is Modown, Mojito, which is used by search mostly, and other properties, is using a subset of these Modown components. Not as many as we like, but we will continue that effort to continue changing the guts of Mojito to use more and more Modown, because Modown is implementing some of the features that we implement initially in Mojito. And it seems that the Modown components are more solid in that sense. At the same time, we have the other two frameworks that are not open source. Is the one that is being used by Flickr. So you go to Flickr today, you go to the Flickr page, and you see it is a single-page application. If you look into the source code of that, you will see a lot of things referencing Express extensions and Express State and Express YUI. So you will see things there that you will realize that this thing is powered by a group of Modown components, especially the new stuff that are coming from Flickr. Flickr is one of the big ones that we.
But there's also so like if you go to, even if you just go to yahoo.com, there's parts of that page there that are being rendered by Node.js and through Modown components. It's actually a hybrid approach, so not the whole page, but parts of it are. But and then also the things, and that's under quote unquote media's control and the media organization. And so there's also the new digital magazine, so Yahoo Tech and Yahoo Food. Those are using Modown components, and there are single page applications on the client. Yahoo Answers is also using Node.js. I forget if they're using Modown or not. But Yahoo Screen is a full app that's using Modown components and YUI on the client. Flickr and Flickr, as Caridy mentioned, those are the main ones that we've been.
This one that are digital magazines are also implementing using Modown, which is the framework that we use in media. So you look at some of the stuff here in the source code. Actually, let me look at the source code directly. You will see stuff like data, maybe. Data?
Yeah,
you see this is generated by Express YUI, relying on Express State to give you the YUI, the YUI bootstrapping process to get YUI ready. So all these new pages that are coming from Yahoo are mostly implemented, especially all these interactive pages that are single-page application or so on, are implemented using a framework that is built by mixing in different Modown components and creating a configuration on top of that and creating some sugar on top of that for people to be able to build this application really quick. So it is proven, it's in production, it's good. Although it is a reality that you need to learn the internals of most of these components to be able to connect them and to be able to have them all together. And we plan to continue working on that area of documentation and so on, but it's also difficult because we don't want to be opinionated about it. we don't want to tell you how to use those components. We want you to mix them in such a way that it makes sense for you and for the things that you're building. So it is a kind of a chicken and egg problem here, but we will continue working on that. And also, essentially, this is the main focus of most of the people in our team. So you will see more and more things coming up from the Modown project.
Very good. So in terms of, so you laid out the future as well. Do you have, if people want to get involved in this, how could they do that?
Good question.
Yeah, I mean, so there are people who are using some of these Modown components outside of Yahoo, and even though we haven't really evangelized them at all or have like a site around this stuff, so if you're using Express and any of these problem spaces that we've tried to talk about really seem to be like something that you're experiencing, like yeah, you can definitely use these components and try them out and let us know. Like I had somebody ask me about Express State, and they were trying to use it on Express 4.x, and they issued a pull request to update a couple things to make it work, and we were able to merge it in and get that going. So things like that are definitely helpful, and I really think that we'll see a big jump in terms of getting a lot of people on board with some of this Modown stuff with the internationalization work, because I feel like it hits it's a hard problem, and we've really solved it in a great way that's really future compatible and very much doesn't tie you into any single framework or application, so it can be used with all of them. And I really think that's a key area where there's not a lot going on in the community, but it's very important for people to have these localized apps, especially if they're trying to go in more places than where they're just speaking English or just one locale. And so it's obviously something very important to Yahoo with trying to be a global tech company or having content that's in a lot of different global markets. So this is something that we really try to solve is like really well as best as we possibly can, and now it's really putting the documentation to it and how we did it and getting people on board, and I really think that will help jumpstart a lot of the Modown stuff. And then the loader thing I think will be the next big one that will really pop up as a big effort that more people can get behind and really get involved with. But we'll definitely be looking to try to introduce the different Modown components that are focused more on Express as we move forward, and also we have a lot going on the build time stuff, which we've been investigating using Broccoli and trying to help out that project as well. So that's I think just another big area. So I really think we're at the beginnings of us getting our heads around all this and everything that Caridy presented, sort of this architecture, where then we can start explaining these ideas more cohesively and getting more people involved at these different sections where it makes sense to, whether it's at the internationalization side, the loader side, the Express side, or the build tool side. They're decoupled enough where you could jump in at any of those points and really help out where it makes sense for you.
Needless to say, we're also actively hiring for lots of positions within the Modown teams.
Yeah, we need help. We need people.
So yeah, if these things are interesting to you, if you're watching this or even via the archive, just contact us on IRC or email me directly. You can find me all over the net. You can even as simple as replying to a blog post or messaging the YUI library on Twitter, anything like that. You can get hold of us.
Yeah, actually, let's get the blog post ready. We have a blog post aligned for Modown, similar to what we did here, but hopefully we can get it ready out there soon, so we can link to the video as well, so people can get can start looking at these things.
Yeah. So look for that soon too as well. So we'll have a way to have a reference just to kick things off. Well, thanks, Caridy and Eric, and everyone who came online, and also folks out there watching. That wraps up our Open Roundtable for this week. If you have any questions or anything to follow up, let me know, and we can also follow up offline.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.